Hi, everyone. It is Jamie Joe right here at Madlit Musings, and today I'm happy to have Amanda Cabot back on the podcast to talk about book number 3 in a trilogy that we've been following. Hi, Amanda.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It is always fun to be here, and I'm so glad we have the celebrity cat in the
Yes,
background who's
yes.
grooming himself now.
Fu has bad timing. He decides to get ready for the camera when the camera's rolling, apparently.
Well,
But
that's to entertain us.
yes, so I'm not sure how many questions Fu the cat will be asking you today.
But you'll have a few.
But we'll have a few. We'll have a few. But you've been here 2 times now to talk about your current trilogy, and now you have releasing in July the third and final wrap up of the trilogy. And this book is titled Into the Starlight. And I can't recall the name of the trilogy because I'm just that horrible interviewer that doesn't do her research.
Well, you were waiting for your cat.
I
It's the
guess.
se- it's the secrets of Sweetwater Crossing. And there
That's
were
right.
secrets, individual secrets in each book, but there's been an overarching one, which
Hmm.
is what happened to Clive Finley.
Hmm.
Clive Finley is the man who built the house that's on the cover of After the Shadows.
Hmm.
And everybody in Sweetwater Crossing thinks they know what happened to him. But in book 3, we find out no, you guys didn't know anything. What you thought was totally wrong.
All the secrets are revealed about the mysterious house and its origins and its builder. That's awesome. So Clive Finley, tell us a little bit about that history again. I know you've done that on a previous podcast, but just refresh our memories. What's the big secrets without telling them?
Without giving away too
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
Well, Clive, uh, prior to the war between the states, Clive was a man from Mississippi. He was in love with a woman named Della. And he wanted to marry Della, but meanwhile he had traveled and he fell in love with the Texas Hill Country, wanted to take her there. And Della's father was a very wealthy plantation owner who said, "No, you're not going to do that. The only way I will let you marry my daughter and take her off to the wilds of Texas is if you can give her a house that's as good as the one she's living in." Well, Clive
All
says,
right.
"Okay, I can do that."
Challenge accepted.
So he builds this house that looks like a southern mansion. It's totally out of place in Sweetwater Crossing, but it's the house that he has built for Della. And then the war between the states starts, and he disappears suddenly. He gets together with friends every Friday night. He doesn't show up one Friday night.
Hmm.
And folks think, well, he must have just gone back to Mississippi to join his people from his town to fight.
Hmm.
And that's what everyone has believed for better than 20 years.
Sure.
Book 3, we have Della, the fiance, coming to Sweetwater Crossing because she wants to see Clive's grave.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been all this time. Her father's finally died. She said, "Okay, I need to see it. I need to have closure," although that's not a word they would have used then.
Right, right.
Um, but she needs to go there. So she asks her almost nephew, and this is Burke Finley, who was Clive's nephew. So had she married Clive, he would have been the nephew by marriage. She says, "Burke, will you take me to Sweetwater Crossing? I just really have to go." And so Burke says, "Yeah, I'll take you." And they're going to be there for 2 weeks maximum. Well, things don't turn out quite that way.
They never do.
And when they get there, and she says to the current residents of Finley House, "Well, I want to see Clive's grave." And they all look at her like, "What are you talking about? He didn't die here. There is no grave."
Hmm.
So what happened?
What happened? And there we leave it hanging
Of course.
because
Here, tell
we
if
can't
I
tell
tell
you.
you that.
Then there's so much more to be found out and discovered in this trilogy. So this is exciting. Okay, so now we also have within this web of mystery that you have woven so adeptly, we also have three sisters. We have sister in book one, sister in book two, and now this is, I'm assuming, the third sister's story as well.
Third sister. She is the middle sister. This is
Okay.
Joanna.
Okay.
And Joanna is a very skilled pianist. She has
Mhm.
spent the last better than a year in Europe with her maternal grandmother studying to be a concert pianist. This is what she wants out of life. But life doesn't turn out quite the way she expected.
Right.
She develops she develops scarlet fever that turns into pneumonia, damaging her lungs so badly that she will never be able to stand the rigors of being
Mm,
a touring concert pianist.
sure.
While she's in Switzerland at a sanatorium recovering from this, she meets, and it's a whirlwind romance. She meets a man, falls in love, marries him, and he dies.
Oh, she's having kind of a run of bad luck.
I know.
You
So
like
here
you
she
you have
is.
all these sisters, and you're like, I'm gonna give her the worst time of it in these books, aren't you?
She's the last one. So,
Yeah.
her whole future has been destroyed. I mean, she
Hmm.
thought she knew what it was going to be, but now nothing is the same.
Right.
So she goes home to Sweetwater Crossing thinking, well, it's home. I know it. It's familiar. But she has changed so much in the time that she's been gone that nothing seems the same. The comfort that she expected there wasn't there. So she has to build a whole new life for herself.
Hmm.
Enter Burke. Burke is the nephew, Clive Finley's
Hmm.
nephew.
Hmm.
He's a physician,
Okay.
and he's bringing Della for this 2-week visit, which you can kind of guess is going to get extended.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Burke has his own problems. As I said, he's a physician.
Okay.
He, his fiance breaks the engagement and decides to marry his partner.
Oh.
And meanwhile, he's reeling from that. But meanwhile, one of the patients dies and he blames himself for that death.
Mm-hmm.
So he's happy to leave their town, at least for a couple weeks, because he needs to sort out what is his future going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
So you've got both Joanna and Burke with these totally unknown futures, trying to
Hmm.
figure out what is it? What does God have in store for them?
Yeah.
Um, where where are they meant to be?
Hmm.
And so that's the overarching story in
Yeah.
Into the Starlight. But meanwhile, we have to find out what really did happen to Clive.
Yeah. No kidding. So there's a lot of kind of unsettled dreams uh, for the characters' futures in this, probably even including Della's, who had waited and waited, and then he just disappears, her love, and she's been left in limbo too. So, how do you handle those questions? My goodness, Amanda, wrap
Well, there's a
wrap it
lot of
up so we all know how to live our life.
there's a lot of stuff going on in this
Mm,
book,
mhm.
which is why I am always challenged keeping to my word count limits
Yes.
because so many things happen. I mean, when I was writing this book, there was a secondary character named Miss Heppel,
Mhm.
and she was just there for supposedly one scene. But as I'm writing, it's like Miss Heppel became a real character,
Yeah,
and she had a lot more things to tell.
they do
So,
that. They do
yeah,
that.
I know, and it's kind
Yeah,
of fun when they do it, but
it is.
it does present the challenge of how do I get this story in there
Yeah.
and still not go over the word count limit,
Right. Right.
which, as I said, for me is always a challenge.
Oh, that's fun. And what is your typical word count that you're supposed to
Uh,
stay within?
Maximum.
Okay, 92,000 maximum. Yeah, that's difficult when you're telling a story this involved.
Well, I ought to learn how to simplify it, but
Well,
especially with this trilogy, because you've got the three sisters.
yeah.
And even though I've written about three sisters before, which I
Mhm,
did in the Westward Winds trilogy,
mhm.
each book was the sister was basically alone.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
here, what I've done is I've brought them back. I
Mhm.
mean, the first book, After the Shadows, Emily is there pretty much by herself. Then in Against the Wind, Louisa comes back. And so we have a lot of interactions between Louisa and Emily.
Mhm.
Now we get Joanna. So all three of them are together.
Right.
And it's the first time I've done that.
Where they've all been together in the same book. Okay.
And it's fun doing it because, of course, you get to see little hints of what happened to the other sisters in their own stories,
Mhm.
but it adds to the word count.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because you have that much more dialogue, that many more lines and points of view to cover.
Well, and references to their pasts, but
Yeah.
you know how you have to do that carefully so that you don't give away the story in case
Mhm.
people haven't read them in order.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
I do like my books to be standalone books. I don't
Yeah.
want people to feel as if they're lost when
Right.
they come into a second or third book.
Right.
But I
Although
also
the
know that not everybody reads things in order.
No, but I do find that if I pick up a book and I start reading it, and then I find out either while I'm reading it or I just finish it that it was part of a set, it kind of nags at me that I'm like, ah, I have to read this in order. Even if they don't require that, it's like, I still need to. So, and I suppose with this trilogy too, that is to one degree helpful if you read them in order as it relates to the overarching plot around the house.
I mean, you don't have to, but it makes it a richer story if you
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So we have the concert pianist who comes home. We have the doctor who's questioning himself and his career. We have thwarted love with Della, and they all come together. Now, does it all take place for the most part at the mansion itself, at the house?
Well, it takes place in Sweetwater Crossing.
Okay.
Um, and, so my books actually all have maps in them
Oh,
because
do they?
I have, I have my characters walk around.
They're
They
not
walk around
stationary.
town,
That's
right?
good. It's good
And
exercise.
different places. I mean, Burke, of course, is a doctor.
Hmm.
So he is working with Louisa because Louisa is the heroine of the second book,
Hmm.
Against the Wind, and she's a midwife and a doctor in training.
Okay.
So we have Burke here who can work with her and give her some more training. And let's be honest, it also gives the men in Sweetwater Crossing medical care because
Yeah.
this is the 19th century.
Yeah.
They're not about to go to a woman.
Right. Right.
So, so you've got that. So some of the scenes, of course, with Burke being a doctor, take place in the doctor's office or in his patients' homes. And and then they move around. And then
Sure.
we have outlining ranches. Continuing characters live on ranches outside of town. And so I send them off there, which is why the map is helpful because then readers can see, oh, yeah, to get from Finley House to the doctor's office or the one and only restaurant in town, you have to
Hmm.
go down this street and cross that corner.
And these are imaginary towns, correct?
Yes,
You're not
yes,
writing a
fictional.
map off of an original historic town in Texas.
Well, for me, it's better to have fictional towns because then I don't have to worry about
Yeah,
what's on what street corner. When I
right.
did my Westward Winds books, the first one takes place at Fort Laramie, which is a real place, and the
Yes, it
second and
is.
third are in Cheyenne,
Okay.
obviously a real place.
Yes.
And I did a ton of research, and there were maps in there too.
Hmm.
But I always had this fear using a real town that someone was going to say, there weren't cobblestones at that corner. Now,
Right.
nobody's done that, but there's
It's
good
real fear.
and bad things about
Yes.
real
Yes.
towns.
It's a real fear of historical authors. That's why when I've done some of my historical elements, like with the circus or a theater, they're based off of something original, but I don't share the real name or anything like that. Cause I'm like, I'm gonna botch this. And somehow I'm gonna miss something in history and someone's gonna call me out.
And I mean, I have to say, another Revell author wrote a book And it started in Cheyenne.
Okay.
Now, she had been here because we got together when she was here, and there were so many mistakes
Oh, no.
that it drove me crazy. I mean, you have to do your research
Yeah. Yeah.
because readers are gonna know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not all of them, but even if you only make one reader angry, that's one too many.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons too. I think I find myself so often sticking within the Midwest. I've had a few people mention to me before, "Oh, you should write something down in New Orleans where the graves are, above ground." And I'm like, "Oh, a place I've never been and have no idea of the culture." I mean, I can do a lot of internet research, but I guarantee you someone from there is going to call me out on a slang
Well,
word or something I use incorrectly.
I've been to New Orleans a couple times and it's a fascinating place, but it is so different from the Midwest.
Yeah.
I mean, just it's set below sea level. So think
Right.
about the humidity. Um, think about the smells from the food, all of the Creole food. I mean, there's just things. If you're writing about a real place, I honestly believe the only way to do it is to have been there.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you on that. I'm working on one of my first novels right now that's set outside of the Midwest, and of course I pick a place that I'm very accustomed to and very familiar with because I'm like, I have to set it in this one spot because I know this spot, and it's not because I don't like doing research. It's just because I want to be as accurate as possible.
And what is that spot?
That spot is the Bob Marshall Wilderness of Montana. So I've spent a lot of time out there camping and
Hmm.
fly fishing and many, many years going out there for the summers. So it's a familiar place. But it goes without saying that even then I'm hesitant because I'm not a local. So I'm still nervous.
But you've got a lot better chance of having had it be accurate
Right.
because you've spent so much time there.
Correct. Correct. Yep. Yep. So now that you're wrapping up this trilogy, what would you say, since we're talking research, was one of the most interesting pieces of research that you did for this trilogy that you say would be like, "Oh, that was probably one of the best ones."
Discovering what medicine was like in the
Oh,
19th century. Now, I
yes.
had done research before because I've had Dr.
Mhm,
Heroines before. The heroine of the third of the Westward Winds books was a physician. And at that point, I explored what they called heroic medicine,
mhm.
purging and bleeding and all the horrible stuff, get the leeches out. But for this book, I needed different things. Because Joanna has problems with her lungs, I
Mhm,
needed to find out how did people treat lung injuries
mhm.
in the 19th century. And I found, oh, talk about a great find. I found a series of printed lectures by a physician in the 19th century. It was
Wow.
published in something like 1883. My books
Okay.
take place in 1883.
Yeah.
And he describes the symptoms of all of these things. He tells you how to treat it.
Oh,
Some of the treatments were incredible. I mean, they were giving people poisons.
mhm.
And
I believe
but
it.
it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And again, just those little details add
Mhm.
so much authenticity when you're writing a book.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
believe me, I kept that file on my
Oh, yeah.
computer. I use it all the time.
That's a
Uh,
great resource. That's a great resource. I had one character who was kind of like, well, there was the real doctor, but then he called her the local quack because she was trying to do a lot of her own home remedies and things. But one of the interesting things I ran across with studying medicine of the early, I'm sorry, the late 19th century, early 20th century, was how they were discovering that morphine was so addictive, and so, for a very, very, very brief time in medical history, they swapped it out with a new painkiller that was made briefly by Bayer, the same people that make Bayer aspirin, called heroin. And they were actually producing heroin for the doctors only to
mhm.
prescribe to their patients to avoid morphine's addiction. And then they
I've
quickly
heard.
found out that heroin was not necessarily going to work as not addictively as they expected.
You realize so much of this is trial and error.
It is. It really
And,
is.
but those, again, those are the fascinating facts that I
Mhm.
love finding when I'm reading a book.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I read fiction, I read for entertainment, but at the same time, I want to learn something.
Mhm.
And so if I was reading your book, I'd be going, oh, yes, I didn't know that. And that would be a story I would tell people. I would say, hey, you know what I learned?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I have to give props to Bayer for pulling it from their medicinal shelves pretty quickly. But yeah, it is. And research is always so fascinating. And then, like you said, when you get to weave it into a story, like into the Starlight that that's coming out for you, it's always fun because then you see history not only from the imagination of the author, but history actually kind of recome alive.
Mhm.
So, okay, so this book comes out in July, and everybody should rush out and get a copy. That's my order. So there's no choice in the matter. If you've listened to this podcast, you must go buy the book, Into the Starlight by Amanda Cabot. What's coming next?
Well, I have a new series that I started on, which is called Sisters of the Heart,
Okay.
but it got derailed. And here's why. When I left Sweetwater Crossing and I finished the final book, I had one big open question.
Oh,
And it was like, what happened to a specific place? And I can't tell you what it is because it gives away the story.
that's fair.
But it's like, what happened there? And I thought, okay, I'll add a couple sentences in the epilogue to Into
Mm,
the Starlight to answer it, but it just didn't work.
mm,
I mean, it was going to be one of those things where you knew the author just plugged it in, not good.
right, right.
So I kept thinking about it and I said, I know what happened here, and I'm going to turn this into a Christmas novella, a whole new story, just a fourth
Hmm.
Sweetwater Crossing. So it's going to be
Hmm.
a novella.
So fun.
And here, remember I talked about word count issues?
Yes, I do.
It, it's a full length book
Uh-huh.
now.
Okay.
Because again, what happened was, I said it in Sweetwater Crossing. I've got
Mhm.
these two people who come into town and they wind up, of course, at Finley House.
Right.
Well, now we've got all the sisters and we've got the
Mhm.
sisters' children and all
Oh
that.
no.
So it's going to be a full-length book. I'm doing indie publishing with it.
Okay.
I expect to release it in October of this year, and the title is One Special Christmas.
One special Christmas. So really, we get a bonus book.
We get a bonus book. And
That's
so
super
much for
exciting.
my plan of doing a novella.
Well, I'm not sure you're going to have too many readers complaining.
I've written a number of novellas, and I thought,
Mhm.
well, this will be no big deal. However, it just kept
Yeah.
growing.
Well, you have a large cast of characters by this time, too. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
They
that's so
refuse to
exciting.
be silent.
Yes, they do. I hear you. I hear you. I have some characters I'm like, please be quiet so I can write this book and not write you into it. Oh, fun. All right. So Into the Starlight, it releases July 16th. And then look for opportunities to snatch up this Christmas novel coming in October. That will continue the story. So, Amanda, thank you so much for being here today. It was so much fun to wrap up this trilogy with you and kind of journey along the whole way. We had fun.
Well, it's always fun being with you. And by the way, I enjoyed watching your cat, who is now sleeping.
He is sleeping, so
He's
apparently
being
we
good.
were very uninteresting as far as the cat is concerned, but I felt like this was a fun conversation, so his loss.
I had fun. Again, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks so much.